Alright. Well, good morning everyone. My name is Hanneke, and thank you all very much for being here and inviting me. I think it's such a great initiative of you students and the school to host a festival about sustainability. For me, sustainability is one of the most important topics of these times. So I would like to talk today about the question, how can we sustainably feed the world? Because as you know, everyone needs to eat, and the world population is growing, and we only have one Earth. So how can we do that? I work for a company called Syngenta. I don't know if anyone of you has ever heard of Syngenta before. No? Well, there's no shame in that, neither did I before I started working at Syngenta 2 years ago. I'd never heard about the company before. But actually, you come across Syngenta in your daily lives quite a lot. Because what we do is we develop new seeds, new traits. So for example, maybe you eat these kind of snack tomatoes every day. In fact, if you want to have some today, I'll pass them around. So we grow vegetables. Some examples here: cauliflower. You might know cauliflower is originally white, but we develop them so they get nice flavors, different tastes, but also that they are resilient against diseases, or that they, for example, need less water to grow or less land.
Sorry.
And we don't only do that for vegetables, but also flowers. So probably some of the flowers that you can buy at IKEA or the Paxis, these kind of stuff, they might originate from us. And the second part of the business is all about protecting crops when they grow. Because just like human beings, when plants grow, they can get ill. There could, for example, be fungi that arrive on the plants, or little insects eating the apple. And another thing that farmers don't like is weeds in their crops. So we develop solutions, crop protection products, as well as application material, and we sell that to farmers. So we are really at the beginning of the food chain. We deliver new seeds and crop protection solutions to farmers. We're quite a big company. Our headquarters is in Switzerland, in Basel, and we work in over 100 countries in the world. So you can imagine that the expertise that we have is quite rich, because growing crop in Africa is very different from the way it is done in Asia or here in the Netherlands. It all depends on the soil that you have, on the level of knowledge of farmers, but also water supply, weather conditions. So for example, an apple that you grow in the Netherlands, that will grow very differently in another part of the world. Now, what do I do at this company? I work for the Benelux region, and I'm head business sustainability. Well, what does that mean? Basically, I'm doing two things. One is communications. So I try to represent the company to the media, but also to politicians, NGOs, talk with them about what we do, explain why we do it, have discussions about the future of agriculture and what it should look like. And then secondly, I work closely with the business, so my commercial colleagues, around the question, how can we make our company more sustainable? So how can our products become more sustainable, but also our operations? Maybe it's similar to what you mentioned, that you have a sustainability team here in the school, and then you look at the energy use, the waste, etc. All kinds of things to make your operations more sustainable. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. So yeah, what I do in my daily job, I actually really like my job. I never have a normal day. Sometimes I'm out with a farmer on the field to have a discussion how they are growing crops and see what challenges they have with sustainability. I host a lot of groups in our technology center in Enkhuizen. I host debates.
Ignore.
Okay. On a lucky day, I get to interview the Dutch Minister of Agriculture. So it's really diverse, and yeah, I really love my job. And I think that's also especially because of the huge challenge that we have in the world. Because as a company, you know, we want to have an important role, or at least a positive role, to bring solutions to safely feed the world. Because again, everyone needs to eat, and it's also important that food is safe, that you don't get ill when you eat it. But at the same time, we also need to take care of the planet. So we work mostly in the Western world with large farmers. If you look around here in the Netherlands, you will see big plots of land. In the Netherlands, a farmer has around 40 hectares. It's really big. But if we want to feed the world, we basically have to depend on the 480 million smallholder farmers. And this number is huge, but that's also because their plots of land are really small. So 2 hectares, they're mostly family-owned business. So you can think of mostly in developing countries, Africa, Asia. It's just a family running a small plot of land, mainly for their own consumption. And the little bit they grow extra, they can sell it on the market and make a living out of it. Now, what's the big challenge? The demand for food is continuing to grow. Like every day, there are 200,000 more people on this planet. And the prediction is that this will continue to grow. I believe in 2050 we'll have another 2 billion people. They do think that the population then might stagnate a little bit, because if countries get more developed, they normally have smaller families, less children. So there will be more people simply who need to eat. And this is an incorrect number. It should be around 820 million people still don't have enough to eat. So these are staggering numbers. And then we're all on one planet Earth. And we also need to use this planet Earth for other things. You know, we need to live, we want to have infrastructure, and a lot of the land is simply not suitable for agriculture. So only 12% of the entire global surface we can do agriculture on. At the same time, we also see that a lot of farmland is kind of wasted because of soil erosion, because of droughts, because of mismanagement that was used too intensively. And also water will be a huge problem. You can imagine that growing a crop, we need quite some water. If you think of growing your plants, or even here in the classroom, you know, you need to water them every week. So we will see a big water scarcity. So that brings us to the question that we as a company think of, that I in my role think of, what to do. How can we solve this challenge? Well, I always think there are 2 no-brainers. One of them is this staggering number that over 800 million people are hungry, but there are 2.1 billion that are obese or overweight. So if you think about that, you know, it's crazy. We definitely have a problem with the way we distribute food. I mean, basically you could say we have enough food in the world, but we in the West, we eat too much, and some people, they have not enough to eat. This is a big problem, a global problem, a political problem that not one party can solve. But we as a company, we try to do our part as much as we can. One, by stimulating a more plant-based diet. So for example, these kind of snacks help to stimulate people to eat healthier and more, well, vegetables, for example, instead of meat. And another thing that we do, that I just talked about, is work with smallholder farmers. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to visit India, where we work with this farmer family and support them. How can they do agriculture smarter to make sure that out of the same plot of land, they simply get more food? So we advise them on how they can use different crops, how they can be more efficient with water, how to best apply crop protection and fertilizers, that kind of stuff. So by doing that, we hope to improve the productivity of the smallholder farms and make them get better yields. The second no-brainer and big challenge is to reduce the waste of food. I believe now 1/3 of the food that we produce is lost. So that's just also a staggering number. You know, all the energy, all the water, all, you know, the effort we put in there, 1/3 of it, we never eat it, or we never use it. What you see in the Western world, most of the waste is done by consumers, you and me. You know, if you think about it, how much food you might actually throw away in your kitchen, or maybe you eat half of your lunch, or, you know, when you go to a restaurant, you don't finish your plate. A lot of it just ends up in trash bill. We're getting better in reusing that food. I know restaurants and also supermarkets are making efforts to take the food and make it into feed for animals, but a lot is still wasted. In developing countries where agriculture is not at a very high standard, most of the food is wasted on the farm because the yields aren't good, or when they transport it into the markets. And that's because they don't have, you know, these high technology systems like we have, like fridges, good transport, or the right ways to protect the crop. So also, if we would stop wasting food, we would basically have enough to feed the people that are still hungry now. Again, a huge problem that no one can solve on their own, but we're trying to bring some solutions. I highlight some practical ones. This is a broccoli, right? Now, many people, they like the little roses and the thin stems, but what do most of the people do in their kitchen? You know, they chop off the thick parts at the bottom because they don't like it. The same is done by processors. You know, when you go to the supermarket, you can buy in these plastic bags these already washed and cut broccoli roses, right? The part in the middle was usually thrown away because no one wants to eat it. So we gave that some thought and developed a new broccoli with a much smaller, is it called a stem, I think? Yeah. That is also tasty. And if you chop it as a processor, you get the roses immediately. So as such, we've developed a broccoli which generates less waste, and we make sure that almost 100% of the broccoli is eaten. That's one thing. The second thing, I don't know if you can see it, but this is a huge potato storage. A lot of the food loss is also created when the food isn't stored in the right way. So when it's not cooled in the right way, or when little insects or fungi start eating it. So we develop solutions also to help farmers how to store the food in the best way to ensure that all of the harvest is maintained well and can be sold to supermarkets. And the third example is how we try to improve the shelf life. So from the moment it ends up in the supermarket shelf, of course you want a vegetable or a fruit to stay fresh as long as possible, so the supermarket doesn't have to throw it away when it gets rotten. So these are simple things. How can we make sure that we divide the food that we have amongst ourselves better? And how can we reduce food waste? And then we have, solutions which we see are or could be solutions for sustainable farming. But I think here the interesting debate starts when you talk about sustainability and what is sustainable agriculture. There are many opinions. So, for example, if I would ask you, do you think that biological farming is a sustainable way of agriculture? If you think so, you can raise your hand. So, do you think that biological production, is that sustainable? I see some showing hands. Okay. And do you think it's sustainable to cut rainforests in Brazil, for example, to grow agriculture? No. So I'm using this example to show that there are many views at looking at what is sustainable. Biological farming is by some considered as the most sustainable way of agriculture because they use less pesticides. It's more, the old school traditional way of farming, which is great. It's got some benefits. But at the same time, if you look at the yields per hectare, at the biological farm you get much less volume. Whereas at a high productive farm, the more common farms, you would get much bigger yields. So what is sustainable? On one hand, biological farming might be a more sustainable way of doing it, but then if you think if the production of the plot is lower than a normal way of doing agriculture, that could lead that you would have to free up more land to do agriculture. And that's, for example, what we're seeing in Brazil, that they're cutting down rainforests to create more agricultural land. So it's a bit of a debate on how you look at things. For example, when I was in India, I don't know if any one of you has ever been there. It's a fascinating country. But when I talk there about sustainability, they say, well, for us the number one priority is getting jobs for people and lifting them out of poverty. Because they say poverty is the biggest driver of pollution. So you can come and talk to us about how we should treat nature and take better care of our waste. If we simply don't succeed in lifting people out of poverty, they won't care about nature or waste. And that makes perfectly sense. So what we do mostly in the Western world and how we try to contribute, for one, as I said, we look at how can we create more resilient, more efficient crops. So how can we improve yields, ensure that they use less water, or simply taste better, so consumers are willing to eat them. We have some great technology out there. There's a big debate about it. Can we, for example, use gene editing, or also called GMOs? In Europe, it's not allowed commercially. In many markets around us, Australia, the US, China, Latin America, they do it because it's a very efficient technology to create new varieties that could provide solutions. but there's a big debate about it in Europe. The second thing we do is, besides chemical pesticides, is develop new biological crop protection, which we call biocontrols. And then a third important thing is to see how we can create a minimum negative impact as possible on the farms. So what we do, for example, in Europe, is, this is a spraying machine. You might have seen it if you go in the countryside. Sometimes when the disease pressure is high, when the insects are there, you will see a tractor with a big spraying machine behind it, spraying crop protection. We don't want the crop protection to end up in the water or in the soil. So we help farmers with a special system that, if they are done, they can clean the machine and that all the water is collected in a recycling system. So we take out all the chemicals before they put the water back into the gutter. Another thing we do is work with farmers and see how we can use different flowering strips next to the farm to attract bees and other pollinators that could protect their crops, and also make sure that the pollination is done more efficient. We are experimenting now with different crops amongst each other, because especially in Europe we quite see a monoculture. So when you drive past an agricultural land, you will only see corn, or you will only see cauliflower, and that is kind of a bed and breakfast for pests, because if there's a pest, an insect that likes the cauliflowers, it can eat them all, and there are no other animals near that will eat the plague. So we're trying to mix it in order to get a better balance, but you can imagine if you have to do a harvest. Harvesting as a farmer is pretty difficult because you cannot use your big machines anymore to collect the yield. And another thing we do is work with big data, satellite imaging. So, for example, some farmers now have drones, or we use indeed satellites. They scan the plot and they can see, okay, here the crop is doing well, oops, here we've got a problem. All this data feeds in the tractor, so the spraying machine knows, okay, here I've got to do nothing, here's got the problem, so this is where I'm gonna apply crop protection to make sure it only ends up there where it's really needed and that we don't use more than it. And another cool thing in the Netherlands is that we work with DSM. It's a Dutch company, and with them we've got a big partnership to look for even better biological crop protection. Well, out of all these things, what is the impact? As a company, we try to contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know if you ever heard of the UN SDGs, but basically all countries in the world said by 2050 we want to make the planet a better place. And they defined certain targets. So for example, we don't want to see anyone living in poverty, no one should be hungry anymore, we need to take climate action. This is these are all goals for the entire world. So we looked at it and said, like, okay, right, where can we as a company have an impact and contribute? So by doing these 6 actions, we feed into the Sustainable Development Goals, and we track every year. We measure it, like, okay, are we making progress? How many smallholder farmers did we help? How did we make crops more efficient? And as such, we try to measure the impact that we have. We can never do this on our own, because there are, a lot of smart organizations in the world that we can partner with. So we work a lot with NGOs, with universities, to make sure that we can have this true impact. Then finally, I come to you. Because this might be, you know, a big question. How can we sustainably feed the world? What can companies like ours do? What can the United Nations do? What can the UN do? But I truly believe that every one of you can have an impact. Might be small, but if everyone takes a little step together, we make a big step, right? So coming back to one of the key challenges, reducing food waste. I've noticed myself, if you focus on it and if you become more aware of what you buy, what you have in your fridge, what you throw away, you become more efficient. And it's really simple stuff. You know, for example, before I go to the grocery store, I check what do I still have in my fridge that I can reuse. Or when I go to a restaurant, most of the time I share a dish. Because many times, you know, you order a big plate, it's way too much, and it will be thrown away. There's also a really cool app. It was recently launched in the Netherlands. It's called Too Good To Go. There are many supermarkets, bakeries, restaurants. They put their food on there by the afternoon. So they look at their storage and they see like, oh, oops, this batch of food is passing the due date. They put it in the app, and then you can buy a surprise box because you never know what exactly is in there. So it could, for example, say, okay, the bakery on the corner, you can collect a bread box at 5 p.m. for €5. You buy it through the app, you go there, and sometimes you get, you know, the best bread ever. Another time you might be a little bit disappointed because the croissants are really, already a little bit old. But I think it's a great way to make sure that the batches from the supermarket or the bakery aren't thrown away in garbage, but that they get a second life. So that's something you could do. Another thing you can do is critically look at what you eat. If we would all eat a little bit less meat, then we would make big progress also in using agricultural land to feed people. Because I believe now almost 40 to 50% of the agricultural land is used to grow crops to feed animals. So if we wouldn't have to feed all these animals, we could eat it ourselves. And next to that, animals can produce a lot of gases that aren't helping for climate. And then the third thing to do is eat more seasonal food. I mean, if you come to think of it, it's kind of crazy why in the middle of the winter we can eat strawberries, pineapples, kiwis. They're all being flown in or shipped in from other areas around the world. It's a lot of travel. And if you just eat more the local in-seasonal vegetables and fruits, the CO2 footprint is much lower. So when you go into the supermarket, you know, kind of think like, okay, what's the season now? Or look at packaging. Where does it come from? You would see that we've got green beans from Kenya are located right next to green beans from the Netherlands. And the strange thing is that the green beans from Kenya might actually be cheaper because they are grown there in different conditions with lower labor costs and lower standards. But it wouldn't be the most sustainable choice to actually choose the cheaper ones from Kenya. So just by changing your own diets, your own consumer behavior, you know, there are small steps, but you can improve. And the same thing goes for recycling. I mean, I think there are 3 golden rules when it comes to sustainability. One is to reduce what you use. So see if you can lower your consumption. The second one is to reuse. So for example, even if your apple is half rotten, maybe you could still eat the other half of it. And the third one, if you really have to create waste, is to recycle it. So find ways for waste to have a second life. That's it.